guys, welcome to another fabulous episode of the Boston Chris Show with yours truly, Boston Chris. And today we have a huge treat for y'all out there in podcast world as we travel from Northeast Texas all the way down to Palmer, Texas, south of Dallas, to visit with the legendary Pappy Middleton at his beautiful studio out there in Palmer called Palmyra Studios. And we got to chat with Paulie for over 2 hours about a multitude of things, from his upbringing in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Oak Cliff to be exact, I believe. How he got started in music. You're going to love that story, how the boogie woogie really infected him at a really young age. He tells us some fabulous stories about his times traveling the world with Julio Iglesias, Raitt, some not so nice things about Kenny G. And we talk about how he became a bassist. We talk about his band Black Horse, about his podcasting, his legacy. So much to chat about with an absolute peach of a human being. This is Pappy Middleton for the first time ever on the Boston Chris podcast. Y'all check it out.
Hey everybody, this is Bubba Keith
and Mike Sauce, and we appreciate you tuning into the Boston Chris radio show.
Hey guys, Boston Chris here, and we're in a different location. We're at Palmyra Studios here in Palmer, Texas, with the legendary Pappy Middleton, Pappy Middleton. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me here and coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. I just feel that I've been so blessed and so fortunate all through my career, and I look back on it, and as a person gets older, you have that thing about looking back, big reflections, and then when you start going through the health issues that come with older age and stuff, and coming with everybody now, I've been dealing with the prostate cancer for 8 years now.
Right.
And when I went to the medical people here in Dallas, and they gave me a biopsy and everything, told me I was stage 4 prostate cancer, and I had no idea. I mean, I was out on the road with Jim Messina, and we were running to get an airplane to get to where we were going to play a gig that night. And I said, "Jimmy, hold the plane. I'll be right back." And I ran in to urinate, and I couldn't get a drop out. And that was the first sign.
That's the first thing you knew something was wrong.
And I got home. That was the last gig of that leg of the tour, and I went home, got a urinary thing all about it, and they just came out and said, "You're stage 4, throughout."
Yeah, you've been living with that for a long time now.
Long time, and like I say, after they gave me some of their chemicals to stop the testosterone production, the peds of cancer, all these kind of things, this first shot called Lupron almost killed me.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I couldn't walk for a month.
Sometimes the cure's worse than the infliction.
I was crawling upstairs. Had to get Nancy. I said, "Hey, turn me over on my left side here, grab some skin here and flip me over," But I immediately flew out to LA and started talking to doctors that were very well versed in cannabinoids and plant-based medicines. And I didn't see the real doctors again for 2.5 years. And then when I finally had a good downturn and went back to them, and my family was all saying, "Come on, Pop, see if what they've got, we'll start working on you." So they've got me in a holding pattern, but they don't know I'm doing cannabinoids too.
Well, from mutual friends, I can tell you that our mutual friends say you are kicking cancer's ass.
That's it.
That's what I've heard.
I mean, I've had a couple of real bad. Well, I had a downturn where my bladder, I couldn't urinate at all, and my bladder was starting to swell, and I finally just went back to the hospital and talked to him and said, "Come on in, we'll run some scans and all this stuff." And when they did the CAT scan on the middle section there, the radiologist, after she did it, she came out and she said, "That's the biggest bladder I've ever seen in 20 years of doing this." And I'm sitting there going, "Oh, well, I kind of feel the same." And she said, "It's bigger than an Australian football." And she was.
I was about to say there's a joke in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, and I'm looking at her and I said, as a Latino woman, you really like Australian football? And she says, oh, it's knuckles. I mean, it's
right,
like, here's guys running around. Even Bonnie said it when we were down there. She says, here's all these unbelievable, godly men out there playing tackle football with shorts and a T-shirt.
Yeah.
No pads, no nothing. They just do it,
Well, I'm really excited to try to tell your story and relive your days, not just as an engineer and a producer, but you're also a phenomenal musician. You're a songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. So there's just so much to you, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you about everything that makes you tick. Yeah. But before we get into the real heavy-duty nuts and bolts, I got to ask a question that breaks the ice.
Okay.
What are your favorite drinks?
A good margarita with a good Mexican meal. Can't get any better than that.
Yeah, that's the Texas answer right there.
Oh, well, that's it. I mean, here's the sideline to that. Stuart Copeland heard a band out of Dallas called D-Drum, and they're all world-class percussionists.
Right.
No other instruments, just lots of percussion stuff. He heard them at a symposium in Boston, made contact with them then. He says, you guys play the kind of stuff that I just wrote a symphony for.
Yeah.
And anyway, they bring him out here, and they spend 3 days with Stuart out him, directing and writing more. And at the end of it, he talked to the guys, John Bryant and all of them. Can you just play this 1 6-minute piece one more time, guys? And then it's tequila time. And I'm sitting there looking around at my buddy, and I'm going, here's a limey that I know he's a Guinness guy. And when he got here, he asked for that room as his personal room. And so me and Ken Mandel is a documentary filmmaker that started all of this out here. He had gear stolen from him, and then he moved out here and found this land and built his own place. And invited Lee Schloss, jazz sax guys, who bought the land over there. Then when he finished a movie and went to L.A. to do the audio on it, he went to a B room out there, and they wanted $50,000. And you give it to us on Monday at 8 o'clock, and you come back at Friday on 12 and pick it up. He says, I wrote the movie, I produced the movie, I filmed and directed the movie. And you're telling me I can't sit in there with you guys doing the audio, and you got me on the phone immediately.
That's the way it is.
And that's how this all started. He said, hey, bud, what do you think about this? And he told me the whole story right in front of him. And I said, well, I guess I'd tell him that, I could build a studio for $50,000.
We'll just create our own space. You can't kick me out of my own.
Studio B back there is all for 5-1 and movie and all that stuff.
Nice.
And so that's how all of this started. But yeah, no.
I'm going to take you back to the 50s here in a minute.
Okay.
But I have a question I want to ask you, because I don't know why this is coming up, but do you even understand and fathom the effect you've had on other people? Do you ever think about that? Because I've talked to a lot of people. I've interviewed a lot of folks over the years, and your name comes up so much in different episodes I've done. I'd love to drop some names. For example, India Ramey. India Ramey credits you with her music career, for example.
We had a great time. I mean, she brought in all of the right people for her music, and we just, my big inspiration for who I am and what I do in music came off of Aretha Franklin when Respect came out, and then when later in time I saw pictures of the session and everything. They had a U-47 up in the air right here that she was singing up to, and that's when I heard that. I said, there's such a difference in music out there that we hear. And especially so much now that so much of it is corporate made movie or music. And I just termed it magic music. And what I've found all the way through the course of my career is when people get together, and Erykah Badu's album that we did here, everybody in the band played at the same time. I had them all over the building, but they had, most of the band out there, percussionists back in that room and the drums in that room. And
that's a major component to what makes you different than a lot of producers, is that human element. Right? That's what creates that magic.
When the humans get together and find that groove, you cannot do it any better.
Yeah.
To me, it's
everything's so digitized now that it can be that element can be stripped down out of the music.
Well, see, that's what happened. Again with Erykah, when we did that album. and everybody played. I mean, they wrote the songs here too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the band would come in around 2:00 and start jamming and just getting the feel and the groove going. And whenever they got going on something, they'd call her and she'd drive out, and she'd walk in and the band would be playing this song, and she'd, Brother B, you know, take it down here.
The vibe's already in the air now.
It's already there, and within an hour or two, they'd completely written a full original tune, and they played it through the night, and just just brought in different ideas. What if we did this here and stuff, and the whole band did it, and Erykah directed it all, and by the end of the night, sometimes that end of the night was 6:00 in the morning, but. It just went song by song like that.
As the engineer, what do you have to do to facilitate that?
Well, I had Chris Bell. Chris did, he was the engineer on it. I helped get tones and stuff on the initial setup and everything. And Erykah, she made me turn off the amp and unplug the near fields. I don't want them, ever. I want to listen to these guys. And so everything was done on the Augsburgers.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and and Chris was around, and he was living in the yellow house out there as we were building the thing. I said, man, if you want to come out here and grow with me, you're welcome. Because I watched him come out of junior college,
mm-hmm.
and then go to work over at Sound Logic, and within 6 months he was running the studio. And he's had the ears and has the technology. He went straight. At that age, he's coming out of the whole computer world.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started building this, one of my dearest friends, and I'd say one of my biggest mentors, is Buford Jones. We met. I came out of the Army, and the first thing I did in 1970, I looked around. There was no local sound companies at all.
So we're talking in this area, right?
Yeah, Dallas Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And Shoko was going big busters with all of the big national acts, but they wouldn't do clubs or anything like that. So I bought a system and started working with it and rebuilding it. And then I had club PAs. I had Mother Blues, Gertie, Sneaky Pete's, just almost any gig that had decent. Club that they had people coming all the time.
You just wanted to have a full toolbox, right?
Yeah, and within about 3 months, everything that I had in my garage that was stacked top to bottom was out doing Willie Nelson at Mother Blues.
So where did you grow up?
Oak Cliff.
Yeah. So right here, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I was just little blocks from.
And you were kind of exposed to boogie woogie music early on, right?
My dad was a...
that was me.
Oh, okay. I was tracking a song last night, and I heard there was a little girl, one of the players, a little girl sitting on the couch over there, and she had a little iPad, and we're cutting this Latino music, and it was going really nice and smooth. All of a sudden, I was hearing beep, 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 beep. I'm going, hello, is that on the tape?
That's called a remix.
I got RF in here or whatever. I just, I kind of, and then of course, when we stopped the track, and I go,
yes.
A little cutie over there, and she's just.
I apologize for that. It won't be in the episode. It'll be pulled out. So yeah, you were kind of exposed to boogie woogie music early on. Right?
My dad was he was playing guitar in the 30s and played a little piano, and I mean this story just goes like. He got a call from a buddy in Fort Worth, and he says, "Man, there's a band over here. It's Bob Wills and these guys over there, and they're looking for some players. You want to come over?" And he said, "They're all standing in line."
This is your dad.
My dad.
Okay.
And I tried to find a few people that could fill this story in, but basically they were looking for a piano player, and the piano players just couldn't play with Wills. They had a problem, and I kind of asked my dad one time, and I said, "Pops, why do you play on the black keys?" My sister was taking piano lessons. I'm watching her play on all the white keys, and he looked at me. He says, "Damn fiddle players," because they all play. Most of them playing B flat. And so my dad, after everybody had run the whole circuit and everybody was getting ready to start tearing down, and they looked up at Dad and his buddy. He said, well, what do you play? Are you here to play? He said, well, I play guitar, but you mind if I try the piano? And it was just kind of that loosey-goosey on piano that as soon as he started playing with them, they were going, oh, we got him.
Yeah.
And gosh, I'm trying to remember exactly the year and time, but it was when Wills was moving to Tulsa.
Okay.
For what was it, King Biscuit or whatever, the big broadcast that was going to Chicago and all that.
Right.
And he just started seeing my mom, and he said, Tulsa? Nah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he had no idea of what could come out of or whatever, but he had met my mom, and he was seriously in love. And
I have
what
a very similar story.
Yeah.
The young lady sitting over there that I'm married to, her father played steel with Bob Wills. And very similar reasons for not going on tour with him. He didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad was, his name was Arthur John Middleton, and everybody called him AJ, and that was how I kind of tracked him. He said, oh, man, I remember this guy, a piano player named AJ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my dad was just, he was just
Like
another
street
lovable
names,
guy.
almost like street names.
Oh, it is, and, but we lived where I was born, was on Yarmouth Street, right off of Zanes Boulevard.
Okay.
They've got some business building there before they built the freeway through.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was courting my mother by sitting out on the front porch of those old 1920 houses, listening to the radio and listening to Little Brown Jug.
That's awesome.
And so when I was about 5 or 6 years old, Dad, we had a spinet piano in the front room. And in the front room of the Middleton house, it stayed spotless. Mom and Dad played bridge from time to time, so they always kept it where we never came in the front door. We came in through the den or out of the backyard. But the spinet was in there, and every once in a while, Dad would just kind of get melancholy after dinner, after working a long time, and it was one of these sliding wooden doors that went into the wall type thing. And I heard the door, and I looked down the hall, and there was Dad sneaking off in there to start playing. And this time I could hear him playing in there a little bit, and I was just really, I want to go in there. And so I went up there and slid the door open, and slid down the wall, trying to not, break the moment. And he played the same thing. He just played this one song, and that's all he ever played. And it was and he'd just play it over and over again. And that one time, I finally looked at Dad when he finished looking over at me. I said, Pops, what is that? And he just kind of grinned at me. He says, that's the boogie, son. Don't let it get you. And then he looked at me. He says, I think you're too late.
Yeah.
Because he knew I just sat there. And to tie this whole story together as far as me being a bass player, before I met Black Horse and everything, I was a guitar player. And I had an old J45 that my dad gave me on my 18th birthday for graduation and my birthday.
Okay.
And so we looked around, and I found a guitar, close to what I was looking for, but out of the newspaper. And it was a 1956 J45 with the tobacco sunburst, like the Kingston Trio.
Yeah.
And we got it for $75. And it wasn't until I almost sold it a few years ago because I was really needing some money. And a buddy of mine was going to buy it, Bubba Keith. And as soon as I let him have it, and I sit there and got to thinking about it and everything, and I sat right here, and I just, tears just came to me. I said, that's what gave me this life. It's that J45. I wanted a banjo.
You still have it?
Yeah. It's right in there.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Because Bubba said, ask him about the guitar.
Yeah. Because I called him up, I got to get it back, Bob. I said, my dad, my family, everything came out of this guitar.
So your sister played piano. Your dad was a musician somewhat as well.
Yeah.
And so was it just you and your sister as siblings?
Well,
was there more than that?
My older brother played, I think, saxophone in high school.
So it's everywhere.
And my next oldest brother played trumpet for a year or so in the high school band. I mean, music was around us all the time.
It sounds like music brought a lot of joy to your family back in those days.
It really did.
Yeah.
It really did. And when I got to record my dad over at Buford Studio one day, I went over and picked Pop up and said, "Hey, you want to go running around town?" And he loved to do stuff down what they used to call the auto aisle down on Ross.
Yeah.
I went down there when I was a kid with him, and old AJ was wheeling and dealing. At one time, we had 5 cars, 2 1952s, a 1953, and a 54, and then he bought a brand new 56 Crown Victoria, for him. And but 3 or 4 days later, I came back. We only had 2 cars again. He would go down there and buy a car, get a good price on it and everything. He said, "If I can make $50 off a car like this, that's good money." And so that's the kind of things he'd do on the side. He built ham radios that he would trade for boats, and
Right.
I think that's where I got my real nature of just kind of letting things play out.
I think it's funny from your story too, reading a little bit about you, is you start off as a musician that's kind of handed down to you from your dad, and you said it yourself. It was too late. You'd already been infected by the music.
Oh, I mean, Little Richard came out, and Fats Domino. I was rocking.
Yeah, I love those influences too. That they are kind of colored music as well, because
it was mostly
shape you.
It was mostly R&B that was creating rock and roll all at the same time.
Right.
And it just had me. And the other major influence in the 2nd grade. I mean, most of my biggest influence in music personally came in the 2nd grade. I was late for school the day that they assigned us to a music class, and I walked in, and all the instruments were gone except a tuba and a trombone.
Oh boy!
And you had to carry your instruments home and everything. And I lived about 3 or 4 blocks from school.
So now Logic starts getting into this. So
oh
you
boy!
the trombone, right?
I went, "Give me that trombone," because my buddy across the classroom was, he was holding up drumsticks, going,
"Yeah, well, the trombone.
This is what I got."
The trombone can double as a weapon as well.
Oh, my brothers hated it because whenever I started practicing, I started going. I mean, I had elephants running all over the house.
Oh my God, that's great, man! I love the story of how you kind of understood that being an engineer as well as a musician is important.
Yeah.
Came from a bad studio experience in the '60s, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, we were in 1964, and I was a senior in high school, and the Beatles came out. And as I found out, when we heard the Beatles the first time, it was Mark Stevens at KFJZ, and he was credited with playing the Beatles the first time in America.
Right.
And he got the record from a New York DJ buddy of his. He said, "They won't even let us put it on the playlist." And so he sent it down to Marky, and all of a sudden he, dun, 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 dun. And I mean, everybody I knew listened to his show at night. It was from like 6 to 9 or something like that. And he was one of these guys that had Tarzan yells and, Chicken Man.
All the sound effects.
All the stuff, And we listened to that song, and then I called a friend. Everybody started calling around. And as soon as we could get a record, we had Beatle listening parties. Almost every night, and even in school, at Carter Riverside in Fort Worth is where I ended up at. We had a huge field house that had been built onto that old high school, and if you were an athlete during the study hall, well, I've got a hitch in my in my get along here, and the coach wants me to go out and use the whirlpool. And oh, okay, they'd let you go.
Yeah.
I'd get out to the field house. The radio was cranked up because now KFJZ was only playing Beatles for like 3 months. They didn't play anything else. And I get out there, and there's 8 or 10 guys from football and all these things out there going, "Oh yeah, they let me out of class." And so I that just really hit me, because what I was listening to at that time was Ray Charles and all of the earlier R&B, and I was, before I knew who he was Charles Brown, and his "Merry Christmas Baby" was like #1 in I think 46 or something like that.
Yeah,
never made a penny off of it. And so I was listening to that kind of music, and as the Beatles and the Stones and the other ones came out, it was just that was the path to follow.
But you ended up in the studio in Fort Worth in like 63, 64.
Yeah.
And your band was kind of like a kink style band, and came out sounding like a country band.
Well, the name of our band was called
The Red Eyes.
The
right?
Red Eyes.
Yeah.
You know, and when we were going to, you know, the last graduation day, we had senior play, where if you were a senior, you could get up there and do almost anything on the stage, where we had the band. Mm-hmm. And so every day of the week till Friday, they announced, you know, it was like a 10-cent thing to get out of class and go to the show. And the first guy got up there, they always had a student do the morning, you know,
the morning announcements.
You know,
kind of thing,
and the first guy, and don't miss senior, you know, music by the Red Eyes. And we got through that day, and everybody was going, "Oh, that's great," you know. But our
until the teachers realized what they're saying.
Well, it was our principal. The principal was he was a short little squatty guy, and his nickname was the Warthog.
Of course.
And he was Church of Christ. And when we had a school dance, they wouldn't let us do anything but country music, because we don't want to get them fired up or anything. And so by the second day, he learned from a teacher or something what a red eye was, and like that. And so he banned the red eye term. And so what we did is we found out who that second day they just said there's music by so and so
from a band that we won't tell you.
We took on another name as a sub name called Crush Unlimited.
Okay.
And we had a guy named Norman Chupik, and he was from Czechoslovakia, moved over when he was a kid, and the family, all moved into Fort Worth and everything. Mm-hmm. And he was my favorite friend because he was such a whack job. I mean, he was just, we're all getting into this rock and roll music, and he comes by my house in a 56 Cadillac Mariah, the funeral car with the fold-down seats and everything, with no heater in the dead of winter. I'm going to hear music tonight. Do you want to attend? And I go, oh, Choops, you bet. We went down to, right there on 28th Street and Main Street down in the Stockyards was a place called the Big Apple. Mm-hmm. And it was they said, this is the Black Mafia owns this club, and you better really have your stuff together.
Yeah, mind your business.
Chupit had been going down there, hanging out with these guys, and they just, man, this white dude's a little strange, but he knows his chops, and so he was into jazz, and we were all into the rock and roll thing. And through the course of all of that, we would go down on Jacksboro Highway down to the old Starlight Club, and black rock and R&B in there, and there'd be 30 or 40 kids sitting out back on their hoods of their cars because they can't get in like we couldn't get in. We would go down there and listen to that music, and then we one night drove over to KNOK, and it was a black station right off of it was over in Riverside. And we found out, we always said, what is that thing? There was a little building sitting on a big lot with a tower on it. Mm-hmm. And we finally drove up there one night, and we were scanning the thing and got on KNOK. And all of a sudden, this disc jockey looked down and says, what are y'all doing here? And I said, I think we're listening to you.
Yeah.
And he just dug it. And before long, and it was just a tiny, it was a building about the size of this room. And before long, all of a sudden, there's 40 or 50 cars down there on this guy's show, sitting out there in the parking lot. And he's out there just, it made him have so much fun because he had a live audience sitting out there.
Let me get back to the Red Eyes. I want to get to the lessons that band taught you, especially from the studio side of things. So you go in the studio, you guys are a kink sounding band.
Yeah.
And the recordings come out making you sound like a country band.
Oh, yeah.
What does this teach you? Because this shapes you into an engineer somehow.
Dad told me I had to learn what that guy knew.
Yeah.
And it turns out, as far as I even asked T-Bone about that when he was out here with Kenny working on a film thing. I said, didn't you work at KXOL, back there in the 60s? Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, we were a little 4-piece band that came in there and rocked out on 3 songs. And if it was you came over to me and I was playing guitar. We had 2 guitar players, sax and drums, and he came over and handed me a Fender bass with black nylon strings on it. Did instead of twang, twang, twang. And I know the song on it. I can play the bass on it. And so we did. And when we came out, I mean, we recorded it and they cut us a copy. I can't remember. I think it was just on a quarter-inch tape. And we went over to one of the guys' houses. Les. He had a tape machine over there, and we played it and everything. We're all just looking at each other going, man, we sound like George Jones or something like that. But I watched him as he did everything through it, and I just said, I have to know what that guy knows.
Was that a bad experience for you?
No, it was really a good one because it told me right then and there from every recording studio session I did the rest of my life. First thing I did is I got to, I met the engineer and we talked a little bit, and I usually wasn't in control of the session or anything. We were with a band that somebody, well, let's go to the studio and do this.
Right.
But I just sat back, and as he was setting stuff up, and I watched him patch something in, I said, what's that? He goes, that's a compressor, And I went, okay. Now I watch him as he plays with it, and most of the compressors back in those days only had a couple of knobs. And then we went to a studio up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, called BJ Records or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it was a steel building built behind this guy's ranch house. And it was an 8-track thing. And I was playing with a band called Sweet Smoke. Sammy Bow, and here's a drummer that could do anything with sticks and all this stuff. And I saw him one night, and all of a sudden somebody said, hey, these guys are looking for a bass player that can sing. Yeah. And so I went over and auditioned and played I Remember Finding Out About Boom, Boom, Boom. It was an English tune. And got in the band, and they just got off tour with Hendrix. They had a school bus they painted white and put every kind of chair in it and threw some carpet on it, and off they went. But as I went to each one of these sessions, I just kept listening and looking and asking questions when I knew it was a good time to ask a question. What did you just do on his vocal right there? Can I ask you that? And oh yeah, and most of the guys were, if they weren't under pressure, they were more than willing.
Did you find some blowback, some competitiveness from people? Did they withhold information at times?
Not very often.
That's good.
Because it was all so new that they would, somebody like me, all the rest of the musicians, they just did what we were told. But I sat there in the studio in the control room whenever I could and just kept watching. And that we did 2 or 3 days at BJ, and I really learned a lot from him up there, because he was more than willing to talk about what we just did and stuff. And it was one of those kind of sessions where we didn't have to rush, and somebody's always telling you do this. All right, play it again, get closer, And so I learned a lot of the individual devices that were out back there. And he had some old Allison stuff, and that's when I really started hearing the sounds that I was wanting to hear. When he'd do something on that, and I go, boy, that just really sounded a whole lot better. Well, this is called a gain break, write that down, and that's what I did all the way through my career. Every time I went into a studio, I just...
Did that start to compete with your musicianship? Just kind of wanting to be more behind the scenes and more kind of the genius behind stuff?
Well, what happened is when I finally, after Sweet Smoke, I got in another band, and I was a lead singer because they didn't have a singer. And that's kind of how I started out on our very first high school band. Nobody wanted to sing, and I went, I'll sing, So I'd sing one song 20 times a night, just about. Yeah. And then we'd play Wipeout again. Because the drummer could play it. Yep, there's no Hey, Dawson, let me hear those sticks. But, I just, everything about music just enticed me. And the other really big change is I was an athlete all the way through high school. I loved all the sports.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. You were very passionate about basketball in particular, right?
Yeah, I made the Fort Worth All City or All District, and all I wanted to do was go to college. Because what happened when we moved to Fort Worth, we moved to Richland Hills. Dad bought a brand new house out there in a district. I mean, it was 2 blocks away from the old Richland High School that wasn't built yet, and we just, all we had was TV then to really, to get any kind of musical thing. But I was, I was playing in a band with, just as a lead singer. Then I got talking to my dad. I said, Dad, we need some kind of a sound system. And because I was the lead singer, everybody else had, they brought their instrument. I got a PA. Mm-hmm. And I still remember at that time, most all the sound systems, locally or a band was a bullhorn on top of a
van.
Dad took me straight over to a surplus place and got me 2 Army tripod, OD green tripods that could get it up about 12 feet in the air. And then he says, what kind of speaker? Have you got an idea about the speakers? And I said, well, the Pools and the Dairy Queens all have that, ticket number 31, and it sounded horrible, but you could hear it everywhere. Yeah. And he said, and so he did a little research himself, and then came home one night. He says, we came out here to Atlas, and I got 2 Atlas CJ44 horns. And they sounded like my voice does right here. And the electric voice horns that everybody was using, it sounded more like this. Just mid-range, and if you were in front of it, you were doing this.
So even then you were state-of-the-art.
Yeah. I mean, Dad, and he showed me and taught me how to wire them, and the connectors. Then he got me a Harman Kardon 35-watt amplifier that had 2 mic inputs on it, and they were the kinds that you screwed on, and almost every night the plug came out of it.
Yep.
Well, that's the other thing. He bought me a soldering kit, and that was from. You remember the Tandy Mart that became Radio Shack?
Yeah.
Fort Worth Tandy over there were slowly starting to put electronics in. Mostly they sold leather goods and stuff like that. And I remember going over there and buying a belt and the materials to make a belt. But he took me out. He says, you need some tools. He said, this kind of connector, he says, it's high, this is high impedance. And I was going, oh, high impedance. And is there a low impedance? He says, yeah, but you're not there yet. So, but he got me a $2 kit, and I just started soldering because I had to almost every night. Being the lead singer, I'd be running around pulling my cable off. So,
Yep.
We'll be right back.
1 second.
It's all laying back there, ready to solder again. 2 bars. And
let's talk about songwriting a little bit, because that's the natural progression when you start being a musician. Is you want to start creating your own stuff, because that's what everybody's doing that you look up to, right?
That's it. That was
everybody's writing original music.
Yeah.
So, what's your first foray into songwriting look like?
Well, when I got that J45 and a Mel Bay how-to book,
right?
And so I'm sitting around the house, and I'd already got some. You remember the Beau Brummels? Laugh, I thought I'd cry. The lead singer played really nice harp.
Yeah.
It was more of just, more of a pad kind of harp.
Yeah.
And so I bought a couple of harmonicas and was playing with that. And then I found a way to tape them on between the curve and my J45. And at the time I was going, well, duct tape will hold it on there. After a couple of duct tape, I can't get that stuff off. Then I finally got a rig for it.
Yeah.
But I just, I started playing guitar and harp at the same time, listening to the Beau Brummels a lot at that time. And all of a sudden, the guitar, I just, for whatever reason, I played a C7 chord going to an E minor. And I went, oh, that's a great sounding. Dun, dun, dun. And then I'd go to an A major to an A minor. and then come back to the C7. And it was just a real easy thing that had, with the seventh notes and stuff in it, and then going to a major or a minor. I hadn't heard anything like that yet. And that really spurred me on. I just, that's when I started writing. When I found some chords that fit together.
So writing was more musical for you at first, more melodic than lyric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I still remember the words to it, but it was a girl guy song. You never went down. But after that, I wrote 2 or 3 more songs on just basic, simple chords right out of the book. And I just enjoyed it so much. And
I was going to say, did you like what you hear?
Yeah, because that very first song, when I found that chord structure that sounded really good to me, all of a sudden what I was feeling about, right when I was a junior in high school at Richland High School, and we hadn't, my dad had already taken a hike, and only my sister knew what was going on with Mom and Dad, and me and my little brother were just out there living life. And I was playing basketball. We had a really, really good coach by the time they built the high school. This coach was one, that's what inspired me to go after college and see if I could get a scholarship and get through college. I never even dreamed. I was a good pitcher, and I batted in the low 300s. And so I was good to a certain degree, but boy, when I pitched, we were going for the high school championship against Pascal High School, and they had a pitcher as a left-hander. He had to have a 100-mile-an-hour fastball and a 100-mile-an-hour curveball that went about this far.
Wow.
You couldn't hit him. I could have stood up there with a flat board.
Or an oak tree.
An oak tree. And it would just shoo.
Yep.
And so I choked up on it and just stood out there with my bat just trying to poke something. And I fouled one of them.
That's cool.
But that was that day in that game, and we lost it, 2-1. We barely lost it. I pitched the game, but it was just, I felt so inferior out there watching this guy pitch. And
I'll tell you, baseball can always humble you so quickly.
This guy was like 6'4", 220.
Yeah.
Muscled up. He went straight to the majors out of high school.
Wow.
They put him on a farm team. The next thing I knew, I was hearing about him out there playing for a year or something like that.
Wow.
But that's what.
And you can say, hey, I foul tipped that guy.
Yeah, but I was.
That's not your claim to fame, though, is it?
No. But what happened to me in that part of my life set the whole thing for the rest of my life, as far as my heart was.
You got injured, right?
Well, I was playing basketball. We were practicing at school, and I looked up and I saw my mom's preacher, because Dad had been gone for a few years at that time, and we went to a different church and found a really, really good Methodist church, and the preacher was just excellent for talking to people and helping them with whatever their problems were.
Right.
And I looked up there, and there was my brother Steve down there with the preacher. And Mom had just gone in the hospital the day before to have a procedure, what they said. And it was a doctor that was doing 5 of these procedures every day for like $5,000 a piece from insurance money. And he was getting ready to retire, and he had like 50 lawsuits against him, but they still weren't taking him, off the clock. Mother went in, she was having some stomach problems and thought she might have an ulcer. Well, he claimed that she had multiple ulcers and then did a bypass, and her pancreas failed the next day, and we went down there just in time to say goodbye to her, but she was already in a coma.
Yeah.
And so that next day after the funeral, my coach and my history teacher were there, and both of them were like the dearest, teachers in my course of that part of my life. And then we moved over to Carter Riverside and moved in with my dad and his new wife. And so from that point on, it was just like I felt it was just a survival thing. I still had a year and a half of high school to go, and so I just sunk my whole body into baseball and basketball.
Yeah, so your world is turned upside down at that point.
It was.
Did you lean on music at that point as well? Because that's your passion, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing stuff. Dad had some guy made a guitar, and Dad borrowed it from him, and it was like solid oak, and it was like a Telecaster. Mm-hmm. Just you couldn't hardly pick the thing up, but it fretted real good, and so I was able to learn some stuff on it, just diddling around. But I still didn't have a book or my J45 yet. But it kept me, by myself. I was, just playing with it and just trying to deal with losing my mom because we were really close. Well,
it sounds like your best relationship might have been with the music at that point, right?
It really was.
Yeah.
I mean, I had some place to put my soul into it and disappear from all that around me.
Music is therapy, so to speak.
Oh, gosh, it was. It truly was. And I could say I'm doing my Latin homework my senior year, and the Beatles came out, and boy, everybody went, ah! Mm-hmm. And so we did nothing but listen to the Beatles. Then we started going out to the Starlight Club and those kind of things. And it just kept me alive. Mm. And when I went down to UT for a tryout scholarship in basketball, Darrell Royal was the athletic director of everything. I got to see him after sitting in his office for a couple of hours, and he's ready. He can see you now. And just had a few minutes talking with UT had won 4 national championships or 3 national championships in 4 years. Mm-hmm. And Darrell Royal was the head coach and the athletic director, and they dominated. Yeah, they dominated it. And I just told him what I could do. I said, my coach, Rod Bird at Richland High School, is the best defensive coach I've ever seen. Our team played full court press, man to man. We're yelling with our hand in front of their faces and everything, and there wasn't a team that could hardly beat us. And then all of a sudden, Mom passed away, and I had to go to Carter Riverside, where we had a history teacher. Not that I was going to be a history teacher from that point in my life. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed history in school, and I figured, well, I can be a history teacher and be a coach. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of, that set up for, a future life.
Now, when does that change?
Right after I went down to Austin.
Yeah.
As soon as I graduated, I had a duffel bag full of my clothes and my J45, and I got a ride out to I-35. He got picked up by a lime truck with a Mexican driver who spoke no English at all, and he goes, So I played on my J45 and sang along, and he started singing stuff, and I'd kind of follow him.
What a story!
And hitchhiked down to Austin, and he was going to Round Rock, but he took me all the way to Austin and dropped me off, right on the highway out there.
Imagine the stories that guy's told.
Oh yeah. I mean, and so I went over to. I was staying in a co-op, and then lined up with the coach. He said, if you want to work out on your own, down here at Gregory Gymnasium, which was the old one. Mm-hmm. And he says, we have night staff down there. I'll let them know, and you can come down. I said, I'll play all night if you let me. Mm-hmm. And so I went down every night, midnight, 1 o'clock, something.
So Austin's what turned music from a hobby to something a little more for you.
I broke my ankle on a skateboard 2 days before I got ready to sign the paperwork for 4 years.
Yeah.
Skateboards had just come out.
Right?
Oh yeah, the skateboards had just come out, and I was working part time at a Gibson store, kind of like a little Walmart type thing. Mm-hmm. And we got an order of these things, and they had the old steel wheels.
I remember those.
They were death traps.
Yes, they were.
Here's a broken leg for you,
mm-hmm.
And I got They threw a bunch of them away that, even the wood was so flimsy that the screws were coming out and that kind of stuff. So they threw a few away, and I went out after work one night and got in the dumpster and grabbed a couple of the ones they threw away, and then, just pulled parts and stuff until I had a pretty good solid one. And then went skating, right in front of Scottish Raitt dorm, where all the women of the campus stayed in those couple of dorms. They were consolving and stuff. And I was riding down the thing, and that's going to turn on a corner, and I hit a little twig like a toothpick. It stopped on a dime. It threw me out on the street, and it's, riding like that.
Nice.
I broke my left ankle.
That changed your entire
Changed
evolution.
everything. I went to they took me to the infirmary, and as I'm sitting there, they were getting ready to X-ray me, and I look up, and here comes Doc Medina, who is they called them the managers at the time, but they were the.
I love that you remember names and things.
Oh
It's
gosh,
incredible.
I mean, because I knew as soon as they had me on the athletic list,
Yeah.
so that when anybody in the athletics came into the medical thing, anywhere off campus, anywhere in town, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You're a student at UT? Call it in, And it was a Sunday afternoon, and I'm sitting there kind of waiting like this. All of a sudden, here comes this guy, and he's in Bermuda shorts like this, and he's just pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, oh. And he had silver hair. He was an older Hispanic man, and that's how you could see him down the field. He'd have it on his whites, but that silver hair just
stood out.
I looked up and I went, oh my gosh, just Doc Medina. And he came in and just fell to my ankle like that.
Yep, broken.
He was at barbecuing with his family when he got the call.
That's why he's in the Bermuda shorts, of course.
Yeah, he was so pissed off to have to come down there.
Yep.
Well, the guy didn't have a scholarship yet. And he said, yeah, you broke it.
So this changes things quite a lot for you. I want to fast forward a little bit to the early 80s. You end up back in Dallas, and you're kind of under the tutelage of Buford Jones at this point in his studio. How'd that happen? How'd you end up into that opportunity?
After I got drafted and everything, came out of the Army in 1970, January, and got to looking around and saw everywhere I went, they hardly had any kind of sound system for the bands. The bands didn't hardly carry their own stuff. So, like I say, I was shooting pool with a good friend of mine, and he brought a guy that had contact with some money. He borrowed $50,000 from the Church's Fried Chicken family.
Okay.
He was dating one of the daughters, and it turned out he was just a crook waiting to see how much cash can I get out of him, and then take a hike. And I don't know if you remember, Arlen Morgan was the music store over there in Garland.
I don't.
And they had one side of the store was nothing but great grand pianists and stuff. Anytime somebody came through town and had was a piano player, they had to rent it from them, and they'd take it out to wherever they were playing.
The venue.
But on the other side, when all the rock and roll stuff started in the mid '60s, Larry Morgan, he had all the gear. I mean, you'd walk into Arlen Morgan Music Store and you'd see Neil Young over there or somebody else that was coming to, and they went down there because he had every kind of amp that was made and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I went out there, and Larry Morgan, I just kind of hung out there for a day or so listening to stuff. And when I came out of the Army, while I was in the Army training, they marched us into the main area, and the guys, the NCOs, wanted a beer, so they stopped and stood us after we'd just been marching for 4 miles. Mm-hmm. They went inside to drink, and I heard music in a little service club right across the street. I went, how the hell with this? I dropped my stuff right there, my M16 too, left it right there on the street with all the 200 guys, and went in, and there were 3 black guys, and one of them was playing an SG. And he just chunka. It's like he was holding a 9th chord and just moved it up and down and stuff. Mm-hmm. And they were playing in the midnight hour. And I went over to the guy that was running that. I said, "Can I get a guitar?" And he goes, "Nah, that guy's got the only one, but I got this." And he handed me an EBO bass. Mm-hmm. It looked just like the SG. So anyway, I mean, the room was real small, about like this. And they're over here in this corner, and I come down and sit down with him. I said, "Hey guys, can I jam with you?" And basically it was, "Screw you, honky," mm-hmm. with an F on the front of it. And I said, "Okay." And they're playing the song, and I was sitting there going, I remember how that goes. I'd sung it for a long time. Anyway, I started playing bass on it. And that 3 minutes that I played bass right there showed me why I needed to be a bass player. Because when I started playing along with those guys, I was listening to it and playing with it. And then I heard people yelling outside, and they were getting ready to move out. So I gave it up, went out there, and I didn't hardly sleep all night. I was sitting there going, it was my dad's left hand that got the boogie for me. That do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. When I went home, I sold some other guitars that I had, and went to Arlen Morgan Music and met Charles Kitch, who owned Sound Productions here, and sold it, and he made his way.
I was gonna say there's got to be a lesson here in dropping an M16 and picking up a bass guitar, right?
What
an analogy.
The rest of my 2 years
in.
in the Army were all thinking about, gosh, I can't wait to get home because I know what I need to do now.
It's just an incredible story. I love it. Yeah.
And I got home and I went up to Arlen Morgan, and I walk in, I'm going, oh gosh, here we go. And I got to buy an amp too and everything. But as soon as I got home, I went to see The Who with Trapeze opening for them. I went to see in Fort Worth at Will Rogers, Santana in Cold Blood, and I'll think another guitar player. And all three of these bands were on tour together. And all the bass players were playing the same thing. It was an acoustic 360 that had the blue panel and an 18 inverted inside of it. And I said, gosh, that's what all the big guys are playing. I better get me one of those. But I went over and I walked in, here's a guy with his foot up on the side thing, and he's playing a bass, and he's playing the Popeye theme. But he's playing it faster than I could sing it. And I'm going, do I really want to play bass? And he turned around and he was a salesman. Hi, I'm Charles. What can I do for you?
I want a bass.
And we became friends like that. And he says, if you'll wait for a couple of weeks, we have a full Fender order come in. It's like 200 or 300 guitars and basses. And he says, you can come down and we'll put a special one together for you. We'll find all. We took 4 or 5 different basses, and I ended up with a full maple bottom with a rosewood neck on it that just fell into my hands.
Very cool. All right, so I'm excited about this next portion because it's something I don't feel like is talked about enough with you, and that's live mixing, mixing tours, so to speak, which is essentially just being in the studio, but obviously, I think there's a huge art element to this, and
it truly is. And the biggest thing I can tell any engineer, well, that's what I've been toying with here, is to take like a Saturday or Sunday, every other week or something, and have 6 to 8 students come out here.
Yeah.
That are passionate about maybe wanting to get into audio, and.
But it's one thing to do audio here,
yeah.
Behind your control board and all that. It's quite another, like you said earlier off air, where we're talking about Julio Iglesias, and you're doing 250,000 people at a soccer stadium.
With a PA made for 10,000.
Right, exactly. And, I mean, this is part of what you are known for over the years, is mixing live tours for just amazing artists.
Yeah.
What is that, the kind of the difference between being in a controlled environment like here in the studio rather than being out on the road? Like what challenges do you face more on the road than you would here in the studio?
I just said it's every day is different.
Yeah. You just have to be ready for whatever comes.
I
right?
just 2 years in a row I was hired by Bernard Brown, local sound company here in Dallas, and they had got the gig down at New Orleans Jazz Festival for the main stage, speakers and power and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they hired me to go down and just sit on top of the whole thing. Because usually only the headliners had an engineer, so all the rest of the time I had some Sharpies and lots of rolls of tape.
Yep.
And the band would be coming on and start playing. And Irma Thomas came out one time. She had 5 horn players, and they all sang. So I had to have 10 mics in a space of about this big. And I'm sitting there going, boy, how am I going to find out which one is doing what?
That's what I imagine it's going to be difficult not knowing ahead of time exactly what you're going to be looking at.
Well, that was it.
That's why I asked you earlier about having a full toolbox. That's something you learned at a very young age.
It was. I mean,
Yeah.
because I was in a band from the start and having to have a sound system, and then as things grew, I added on to the sound system and stuff until I had the money guy come in. We bought the big package from Arnold & Morgan. And it just, something about being live out there, and again, that was part of being a musician and being in a band. When you had good people that you liked to play with, and you all kind of understood what you were going for, it was like that idea of magic music. It's all the humans, and when you put the right set of them together, and you all have fun, and that's kind of the whole thing about Black Horse. I met these guys in a club one night, and there was no audience in there, just me talking to the club owner about booking another band. When I heard these guys, and their bass player was having some health issues and stuff, and he couldn't finish the gig, and I walked up there and asked him if I could jam with them. We jammed for 2.5 hours, and I've been in the band for 53 years now. But it was just all, the magic of music was always that feeling, just the feel. That's one of the first things I asked Bonnie one night. I said, when you're getting a song, when somebody's, pitching your songs, what are the parts that you're looking for? And she says, there's only two things. First, it's got to have feel. It doesn't matter if it's fast or slow or whatever. You just got to be able to feel that thing. And then the only other thing was the content of the song. If it says something that was worthwhile, then
which goes back to feel as well. I mean,
that's it.
Yeah,
that's totally it.
It's very circular.
It just it was just everywhere I went within the music world that I was cast into. From all the different things of going to college and going, getting drafted and going in the Army right in the middle of Vietnam and all that kind of stuff. Music always pulled me back in. And when I first got out of the Army and came home, I got married about 3 or 4 months. The girl I was dating for a couple of years, and we were dating. She had 2 girlfriends that lived next door to me in an apartment, and we all met the first day I was there. And that's when I realized I was in love with her. After I got, I'm sitting out in Fort Polk, Louisiana. And but when I came home, I said, honey, I need to buy a piano. I said, there's songs that are so deep and heavy in my heart about what I just went through for these 2 years. And she understood it. I mean, my sweetheart wife was the best friend I ever had, and she passed away some years ago. But she was the best friend I had because I was like Iron Man Flint. I had 2 smart, wonderful women next door to me, and this was their girlfriend. And they'd all grown up in elementary school and stuff over in Dallas. And it was that same way. I mean, she listened to what I played, and we were rocking. I had bell-bottom hip huggers, all the clothes of those days.
What was her role in all of this, the studio and your engineering, your musicianship?
She just, she knew that I was, that music was my life.
Yeah.
When we met in college, I just moved into this apartment, and it was the outside apartment, and then Betty Kay and Dolores lived next door, and I hadn't even met them yet.
Yeah.
And my bass player, I was still playing guitar at that time, and my bass player, said, hey man, can you keep my bass so I don't have to lug it all the way back to Fort Worth? And Willie Nelson's amp, those old acoustic amps, he had an acoustic bass that had a 15 and a 10 or 12 in it. And so I lugged that sucker up to my apartment and everything. And the next day I'm sitting there and I've got a hi-fi stereo that my brothers gave to me that was old as, it was hi-fi, not stereo. And it had a little tiny speaker on it. And I'm sitting there going, well, I got a solder kit and I've got a bunch of different wire here. And so I made up, I soldered the two leads to the leads on the speaker of
Yeah.
the record player, and then put a 1/4-inch jack on the other end and plugged it into the amp. All of a sudden, I had this boom, 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 boom. I mean, I had like a subwoofer there, and all of a sudden, I get a knock on the door, and it's Betty Kay and Dolores and Faye Carroll, their friend. And as soon as I saw Faye Carroll and she's looking at me, I'm going, wow. And she was 2 years older than me. I'm going, there's a woman. And she looked at me and she says, are you playing a tuba? Yeah. She just had to ask me. And I was going,
No, I chose trombone.
Because I had Tony Bennett's greatest hits.
Okay.
You know, and so here's this beautiful music coming out with big round bass notes and everything. I said, if y'all don't mind coming in, and I introduced myself and everything. They came in and I put the record back on, and they were like, wow, we never heard anything like that. And I said, well, it's, you know, it's my bass player's rig, and I found out how to get it. You know, I just made it work better for me.
This is music serving you well again.
Serving me well again.
Yeah.
And then they finally asked me, he says, do you play bridge? And I was going, wow. I didn't think I'd ever be able to tell somebody, yeah, I play bridge. Because down in Austin at UT, I was living in a, you know, it was like 2 stories of 20 people up here and 20 people down here, and they had built-in bunks into one thing
Yeah.
for nighttime.
Right.
You know, communal, you know, shower and bathroom, all that stuff. And down there, it was just like, you know, it was kind of every man for themselves and everything.
And here you are with 3 girls up in your place.
Yeah, and now I'm, you know,
Screwing
I'm
over
back
2 men
with them.
somehow.
And so, but we played bridge down there. They had, you know, each one of those sections of 20 people had a little social room there
Right.
with some round tables in it. And I get in there, I'm a freshman, and these guys are down there playing cards every night. I mean, it'd go all night into the morning and go to class.
Right.
And when you wanted to play, you sat down there, and whoever was next, and somebody got up to go study or whatever, you jumped in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was, again, just like engineering, I just sit there and so you're bidding 3 spades. Why did you do that? Well, it's this, and this, and that. Because my mom and dad played bridge, but I never watched them. I just got in there and got the candy corn and all the little mints and stuff. Get your ass out here, kid.
So you're just a question asker.
I am. Yeah, I don't mind asking anything. I try to be, you know, very respectful.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I want to know the whys.
Yeah. And so I went over and played bridge with them and fell in love with that woman because she was my partner, and they were just playing 3-handed bridge, and we just whooped Betty Kay and Dolores' butt. And then
They lost on purpose. You know they did.
and one, you know, later the next week or something, because Carol lived in Dallas, and she'd gone to school for a while and didn't like it, and then she got on with Brandon Fairways and was like a reservation person, and picked her own time, so she worked from like, you know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon till midnight. And then she would join us at a pizza place over there. It was at Love Field.
Mhm.
The place that's Uncle Julio's right now used to be a pizza place that had a stage in it with all these pickers and players coming in playing folk music. So we go down there and drink many pitchers of beer, and I'm sitting there with 3 women, and I got knocked on the head a couple of times.
Oh, I'm sure.
OU weekend, we're walking down the street, all 3 of us together, and all of a sudden I hear somebody say, "You've got way too many, boy," and he hit me in the back of the head with a whiskey bottle, and I'm on the ground.
You just tell them you're a bass player. They'll understand.
And I finally, you know, kind of came to, and I said, well, this is the last time I think I want to enjoy my life down here on the streets of Dallas at OU weekend. Because it was a Saturday night after the game had been played and somebody lost, and that one, I think, Oklahoma, and they were still in town, and they were lots of fights just walking down the street. But yeah, every time I got into anything that was really transitional for me, leading on to other things, it was always music was the core part of it.
You always end up back there.
Yeah.
And that's how passion works. Regardless of what the passion is, it always shows its ugly head.
Yeah.
You know, it always, whether it's sports or politics, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So you've had so many remarkable experiences with so many, famous people. Let's be honest, from Bonnie Raitt and Jackson Browne, Willie Nelson, Erykah Badu. What do you owe all of these opportunities to? Because they don't just happen. I'm sure there's a luck element involved as well. But.
Well, it's just like when I built my little small PA company, it was because there were none of them out there. And
so it's just fill in the vacuum, fill in a role.
Yeah. And I set up a PA out in Grand Prairie at the county line. And it was a club, all of them were country and western clubs on this little strip mall there. Mm-hmm. And it's right on the county line between Arlington and Dallas. And turned out to be Willie Nelson playing this bar 2 nights, sold out. And it was my first night with my PA. I'd got all this gear and stuff and was taking it out of boxes. I just pulled it in there and started stacking and doing all this stuff and putting it together. And Willie was like the kind, he walks in carrying his amp, puts it up on stage. All he says, I just need a vocal mic and just carry on from there. Real nice and everything. And I went, you bet. And so I did the 2 gigs and everything. They came off really, really well. The woman who owned that club was she was a real wingnut, and she was a Willie freak. And after a couple of gigs with Willie, then I got another one down at the old Sportatorium where they used the ring for the stage.
The Von Erickson.
And it was Willie and Asleep at the Wheel. And that's where I met Ray, and we became longtime buddies after that. Mm-hmm. What's up, Pappy? Well, hey, what's going on, Ray? He said, I'm just sitting here rolling. Mm-hmm. Sitting on the tour bus, just rolling a whole box full of doobies.
I have a question for you. As you're doing these gigs, you talk about the Willie Nelson experience.
Yeah.
And you say, they went really well.
Yeah.
How conscious were you of that prior to doing the job? Like, if I do a good job, they're probably going to ask me back.
Yeah.
Was that important to you prior to these gigs?
Well, it was just, it's always, that's been the thing I question about all of the years of doing this thing, over 50 years and doing audio. Every gig that I ever did, even with Kenny G, I got that gig from a friend that had worked with me on Julio. And I gave him notice within 2 days. He was just a jerk. A talented songwriter. The guy was a great player and really talented songwriter. But his reason for it, when I found out, his reason for doing what he was doing was to prove to his dad that he could make a living doing music.
Yeah.
And I said, man, that's no reason to be doing this. You've got the talent, you've got all the skills.
Yeah.
But by the second show, I had to go out, and we were in it was like Poughkeepsie, New York, and it was raining and cold, and it was a jazz club that they had sold out the first show and then rolled it over and did another show afterwards.
Yeah.
And I got up there. I had to go out in the rain, and I didn't have a raincoat or anything, and I kind of wandered around downtown, and I finally saw some neon lights about 2 blocks away, and it was a drugstore. And I was, they recorded all the shows on cassettes, and he didn't have any cassettes, and, he said, I want all my shows recorded, and I go, I hear you. And so I went out and got a pack of, normal bias cassettes for like $1.34.
Yeah.
And go back, I'm sitting back there, 2 or 3 towels around me, just, I'm soaking wet and mixing his show and everything. And after it was all done, got everything, we all got on the bus, and it was just one bus, band and crew and everything. And the gear was underneath, so all of our luggage had to fit into our bunk with us. And I was going, man, what kind of gig is this? And Rodney, the guy that got me the gig with him, he said, man, have you got any receipts or anything? He said, I'm doing the book right now. And I said, yeah, and I pulled out this.
The $1.34?
The $1.34 receipt. I'm pulling, because it's about to, just, melt. And so, I sit there and think about, we're standing in the aisle between the bunks on a tour bus, and we're starting to roll down the road. Here's Rodney, my buddy. Here's me, and here's Kenny, and I mean we're this close to each other, like this.
Tour buses are small. Yeah.
And Kenny he would never look me in the eye, and I started to get really pissed off about this. I was about ready to bail already, just because of how bad his stuff was. He had people make stuff for him that was just horrible stuff, and he was the worst sounding guy in the whole band. The rest of the band sounded like $1 million, and he was like, it was just. I mean, I did everything I could do with his horn.
Well, that makes a lot of sense because looking at your bio, there's only one line about Kenny G.
And I
Mixed the tour for Kenny G.
And
it's the shortest story on the whole bio.
And so I hand my receipt to Rodney, my buddy, and he looks at it and he goes, $1.34. And Kenny looks at Rodney and says, "What's that for?" And I'm sitting there looking. I'm looking at Kenny. He's looking at Rodney. And I said, "It was for the 3 tapes that I went out in the rain to get for you, so you'd have a show tape tonight."
Yeah.
And again, he never looked at me. And he looked at Rodney and he says, "I can get them out of L.A. for 3 cents or 4 cents cheaper." And then I'm going.
We're not in L.A.,
and
buddy.
I just looked at it and I said, "I just have to give you notice right now that I'm giving you a 2-week notice. You need to find another engineer."
Yeah.
And I said, "No, by the way, let me see I want to see the receipt for your plane ticket to L.A. to save a nickel."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "This is not. None of this is about music."
Right.
None of it was. And I just sat there and he kept looking. He never looked at me. I had to do this to him one time, but he never looked at me. And
I love that. So you're defending music at that point. Like
Yeah.
you're actually annoyed by that.
when I started that 2 weeks worth of stuff with Kenny, his song was going up the charts, and we were playing all these jazz festivals. And the last one that I was supposed to do was the Playboy Jazz Festival in L.A. And I got there and I got the band all up there playing. And he went from like 2:00 on the first day to next to last, right in front of Earl Klugh.
Yeah.
And his manager comes up to me as we're starting. It's just starting to get dark, and it sounded as good as I can get it because all the rest of the drums, bass, keyboards, everybody just sounded awesome. And the manager comes up, "What can you do about Kenny's sax?" I said, go up there and cut the cables and give him a megaphone or something.
Oh my God.
I said I've been told he had some custom guy make this thing up, and it was he was wireless, and he was using a guitar nasty wireless system, and so his sax had all this distortion on it and everything, and he just didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
And I just told him, I said, that's sorry, bud. But I had to do the next show because they didn't have the engineer. One guy was coming. And on the next show, one of Kenny's things is he knew how to do circular breathing, where you can just keep playing and playing and playing and playing and playing and never take a breath. It's all going like this. Well, that was his big moment in the show, is he'd have Rodney, who was the production manager, buddy of mine. He'd find the largest black woman sitting on an aisle somewhere where Kenny could get to her. So he'd start the circular breathing on stage and then come out, and Rodney with a flashlight, and come out in the audience, and then here's this very large black woman sitting on the end of an aisle like this, and Kenny would hop up in her lap and just dig his butt into her lap while he, he's just going with notes.
Okay.
And
interesting.
And so he's wheeling and dealing, and this woman really into it. So she's got her feet off, and she's like this with his little skinny ass in her lap. And I'm just cracking up because I'm out in front of the house, and they're right there, and I'm just looking at this like this, and all of a sudden this wireless lost signal.
Oh no, that's great.
And he's going, it was just like watching, Howdy Doody or something. It was a big flip out, and he hops up and is trying to get it back, but he's just going, as he's running to get to the stage and find some solitude. I got to get away from the audience.
Oh my God.
And after the show, Yeah, and it's my last show. The guy from Maryland Sound shows up, and I just, I had to quick talk with him. You ain't gonna like this, brother, unless you really need a gig.
That's awesome.
I had to bail. I couldn't handle it.
So how did you meet Bonnie and get that opportunity?
Well, I came off the road from Julio.
Okay.
And this again all started with my buddy Buford. We're sitting in the studio, and he gets a call from it's the sound company out of it's Colorado now. I'll think of it in a second, but they were a Canadian sound group that moved down in the States, and Buford had done a lot of work with them. And Buford gets a call from them, and they're saying Julio's having all kinds of trouble with sound and stuff, and he just moved to the States and had all these problems and everything. And so I'm sitting there with Buford at the studio while this phone call's coming through, and he said, well, they're going to pay me a whole bunch of money to come out and listen to it for a week before I go out. I can't remember, it's either the Jackson Victory Tour or what. I mean, it was some super tour Buford was waiting to start. And he calls me up every night while he's out with Julio. He's calling me up. He says, I haven't touched the board. I haven't done anything. I just sit here and listen. And it's a young guy who has no experience whatsoever. He just did a one-off gig in Miami for Julio, and Julio liked him. And I'll give it to Julio. Julio was really a nice guy, and he didn't know any of this stuff. But when he found the man's name was Chris Carlson, he's a great engineer now. But he was trying to get his chops together, and Buford on the last night of him doing stuff there, he calls me up. I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I just think he needs a helper. He needs somebody that's got the experience to get him tied down and help him do this stuff. And so I went out the next day, and Buford was his last day there, and it was Julio's birthday. I mean, these kind of stories, I don't know how I get there, and it's Julio's birthday, and they're playing the big showroom, and I'm looking at it, and it was so quiet when they started the show, and I'd met Chris, the engineer, and I'm standing there, and I'm not doing anything. I'm not hired yet. I'm just there to listen and everything. And when they started, it was like, tick, 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 tick. I mean, here's this, he's got everything. It's like a 24-piece orchestra and everything, and it was so quiet that it was just Julio's voice and his reverb, and everything else was just really soft and everything. And what they just needed somebody to come in and help. And which I did. And when Buford left, he said, man, all I can tell you, if you don't like it, dog it home. Get your Greyhound ticket on your own and ding him out, And ended up staying 6 years.
Yeah. And that led you into Bonnie, right?
Yeah. Because, after I came off a 3-month thing in South America with Julio, I'm sitting there with Buford again, and he gets a call, and it's from Mason Wilkinson, who was her guitar tech and stage manager guy. And Buford said, well, he said, Bonnie would like to hire you for 2 weeks, and she can pay you $750, and she knew him through Jackson. And he said, well, I've got a couple of guys I can recommend. And Buford, after we got off, he said, man, I couldn't just throw you right at them. You got a gig, but anyway, Mason called me, and we had a talk and everything. I told him, he said, how would you describe what you'd make Bonnie sound like? I said, well, from what I've heard her guitar playing, it's just really excellent.
Very
slide
good.
Playing.
Yeah.
And I said, I would hear the band just, a really, punchy, full rhythm section, which she had. And then her voice right up on top of it, in your face. And he says, man, that sounds just about like what, I hear when, we have an.
And 2 weeks turned into 30 years, essentially.
30 years. The first gig was in a beer bar, and there's a T-shirt out there that's it's got a big ear on it.
Yeah.
On the way to the airport, because I had only talked to Mason, I hadn't talked to anybody in the band or nothing. they're flying in from L.A. and changing planes in Dallas, and I've been up 3, like you do. When you leave on something like this, there's 2 or 3 artists going, aren't you going to finish my stuff? And so you're up all day and all night mixing and finishing a couple of projects. So I get on the airplane, I don't see anybody, and I just kind of I get a window seat, and I'm like, oh, and all of a sudden, they're trying to close the door on the airplane. I still hadn't seen any of the band. All of a sudden, they're come on, and here comes Bonnie, and she's got her hair up and a hat pulled down and sunglasses and everything, and all the rest of the band looked like they'd been doing blow all night. They were so just wiped out, and their seats were in the back of the airplane. But I bought that T-shirt on the way to the gig. After I said, I want to check her out, because I was ready to leave Julio. I really loved everything about it, but I was so tired of flying from Perth to New York.
Yeah.
16-hour flight.
International
all
flights.
the time. All the time. We flew from New York to Tokyo, over the top, for a one-nighter.
Wow.
And then flew back.
And then back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just all the time, and I was just wore out, and I wasn't seeing my family, and I was just ready to make that next step if it came along. And so when he asked me, and after I talked to Mason, Buford Jones, hey man, you got the gig, and Buford turned to me and he said, well, I can't really do the tour, Bonnie, and he finally talked to her, and he said, I really can't do it. And she said, well, I don't have any money because I hadn't played in 4 years, and this kind of stuff. And he said, well, I'm getting ready to go out for 3.5 months, and they're going to pay me $5,000 a week. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so that's when all the stuff happened with me, and Bobby Hickey was the other engineer offered up to her. And anyway, I get this shirt. I stop at Love's gas station. I sit there, paying for the tag, and I look over and see these T-shirts, and it's a big rubber ear that sticks out on your chest, and underneath it in lowercase but really bold text it says "huh."
Yeah.
And so, I'm gonna check her out. If she's that kind of, I want to see if her true nature is what it would be great to work
like playful and stuff.
Just and so I had the shirt on.
She's a redhead, so I imagine she's probably pretty playful.
Oh, she's playful.
Yeah.
To the death of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the shirt. I put the T-shirt on at the truck stop, and then I had a flannel shirt over it. And so I had it, covered up. Nobody knew.
You set her up.
I set her up really good. And because I was on the front of the airplane and they were in the back, as soon as the plane landed, it was somewhere in North or South Carolina, little medium city of the first gig, and it was just a beer bar. It probably held 125 people, and it held 500 while we were doing it. I mean, it was just like that,
wall to wall.
And so I go to the bathroom, then head on, okay, the baggage claim's down here, and I go down there, and it's down an escalator, and all I can hear is this, where's my new sound guy? Where's my new sound guy? And she goes, where's Polly, my new sound guy? She's yelling it all out down there in baggage claim, and I'm going, oh boy. And I said, this is going to be great. So I come riding down there like Trump. I'm riding down the golden escalator like this, just, kind of, just easing on into it. And as I get to the bottom of the escalator and get off of it, and I was the only one on it, she was about from here to the door right there and turned that way and was just turning around, just broadcasting with this, beacon of, she got a really mid-range voice.
Yeah.
And she finally turns around, and I'm just standing there looking at her, about this far, and I'm just staring her right now, and she looks at me like this for a second. And just wondered, are you the guy? And then I did this. She stared me down. I go, and opened it up, that big rubber ear, and boy, she goes. She looks at it, looks me in the eye again, looks down at it, and looks me in the eye, and then she goes. Walks straight over and gives me a wet willy in my rubber ear. And I said, I think I'm going to whack this.
It was great.
And so she had, she had, most of the old band members that she had, Hutch and all these guys. Hutch used to play with the brothers in New Orleans, and we go to this gig, and it's just, they're all little one-off beer bars, except for the last one of the gigs was that Wolf Trap, and here's a real gig. But I come in there, and they all we went straight to the gig, and they all kind of load their stuff around a couple of big tables, and they're working on a set list. So the keyboard player that she'd brought in was, she leaned over, she says, "Do you think the Holiday Inn will ever wear off this guy?" Because he was dressed real nice and playing a keyboard on a stand, but he was really pop music personified. But they get over to start working, and I get the house guy out there, and they had 4 old JBL boxes up there, and I said, well, at least the speaker cabinets are, let's put it. And right before I left, Buford said this was, May of '86, and CD players had just come out, and Sony's were in the, had a battery plate that they sat on. Mm-hmm. He said, if you got the money, go buy you a CD player and get 2 or 3 of the best CDs that you like. And
that would have been really early on in CDs. Then.
Yeah, really early.
Really early, yeah.
And the big hit record at the time was Stevie Winwood's Higher Life.
Yeah.
And boy, I bought that one immediately, and I got the very first Three Dog Night album was Eli's Coming when they were rockers.
Right.
So I had 2 or 3 CDs, but I had that one ready to go, Stevie, and they had 1 power amp for the whole system. When I go up on stage, I look around, I look, and it's a PV800. That's what I call the 2x4 speaker block.
Right.
They had, 8 banana clips into all of it into one hole on it, and we're running it mono, and they had a 2x4 underneath it to support the weight of the banana clips so they wouldn't fall out.
Right.
I'm going, oh my gosh, it's a 2x4,
So you want your soldering iron back, right?
Oh, well, I called the kid that was, the owner wasn't even there at the club, but the kid, I said, babe, I need 3 brand new power amps in the boxes. I don't want you running over to somebody's garage and getting this.
Yeah.
And I said, if you can't do that in the next 10 or 15 minutes, we're not going to have a show tonight.
Yeah.
I will not put an artist up to sound it. because it just sounded horrible.
Oh, so it's Kenny G, right? And you would have been fine with garage amps.
Yeah. I pulled up when I pulled up, I put, the Stevie in and started playing the song, and it's all percussion, and I turned it down, and I pulled it right back down, and Bonnie's sitting, 20 feet over here, kind of, we're doing this little thing where we're kind of eyeballing each other.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this and kind of looking over there, and all of a sudden, boy, the amps showed up, and the kid had done his really good homework. All the banana clips were labeled, and they had the cable thing, and all of a sudden, 2 of them over there and 1 of them right here. And I wired the whole thing in like 5 minutes.
Wow.
And then walked out front, and I said, well, you do have a stereo crossover. He said, just a minute. He gets in the back of it, and all of a sudden I'm back to stereo with all this thing. Then I put in the music again and slowly pulled it up, and he had stereo graphics there. And just as I was coming up, I'm kind of hitting a couple of hot spots. And I look over at Bonnie, and and that's it. After I got it up to full volume, just had a few EQ tweaks on it. I'm looking over at her, and she's kind of doing this in her seat, looking back at me like this. And by the time I got halfway into the song and at full volume like this, she was out of her chair doing the the grind.
Yep.
And I said, well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did the show real quick, and it came off great. The crowd was really rocking, and Bonnie, she was really rocking because she hadn't played like that in almost 4 years.
It had been a minute, yeah.
And boy, she was just ripping it up, and they played a great set and everything. Finished the show and everything, and I'm trying to pack my brand new CD player away before I didn't want to lay it there. All of a sudden, this guy comes walking up to me, and he's not the age that all these young people were, and he's a bald-headed guy like this, and he's just trying to point. I need you to go with me right now. And I'm going. I want to say, are you gay? Because I have to make a decision before I can go with you.
Right.
Yeah, and it was real nice. He goes, I'm Tim Burnett. I'm Bonnie's manager. And I went, oh, okay. I said, well, let me pack this. He said, well, the other thing was, Buford said, take your computer with you when you go out. And I had the first Mac 512.
Wow.
I mean, it took 3 or 4 floppies just to get it started. And he says, take a spreadsheet thing, because everybody out there was still using, 3x5 cards.
Right.
Each song, they flip it over and so forth. He said, take your computer, do your set list on that. He said, it'll blow them all away. He said, there's not a musician in L.A. that's all turned on the computers.
Yeah.
They were computer geeks before.
Yeah, that's 86.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've got my big, beautiful, Apple bag with this, black and white screen this big, and the computer's this big. And so I immediately set it up out there, and they're all looking at, man, he's got a computer. And I was hearing little bits and pieces from the guys in the band. Man, this guy, he must be some kind of pro. I mean, all this stuff. And did the show and everything. Of course, everybody was real happy, and Tim grabs me, and I just grabbed my CD player and stuck it inside my jacket and held it on. Went backstage. Bonnie's running around just like Cheryl. Oh, boy, this was so much fun. And she was just going on, and she was soaking wet because it was just a beer bar.
Yeah.
She had a towel, trying to, get the water out of her hair and all this stuff. And she looked at me, and then Tim looks at her and says, this is the best I've ever heard you sound in your entire career. And she looks at me, and she runs over and jumps up on me.
Nice.
With her feet dangling all like this, whispering, promise me you'll stay with me forever. Promise me you'll, I couldn't, I'm sitting going, well,
I guess I'm going to have to call Julio.
Yeah, what, I just sit there, and she, she said it 2 or 3 times.
No more red eyes to Tokyo.
That's it, red eyes to L.A. from New York. That's as far as we're going. But she just looked me dead in the eyes, and she said, will you stay with me? And I said, you got my phone number.
Yeah.
And I said, when you're ready to, when you're at that stage of really getting it done. So the next 2 years, she did maybe a 3-week gig on the next year, and then the next year she was finishing up Nick of Time.
Yeah.
So we were getting ready to do the full tour and everything, and the record company she'd signed with Ron Stone and Gold Mountain. She had everything working for her.
Yeah.
And the album was, Ed Cherney, engineered it, and Don Was produced it. Mm-hmm. And it was just, it took 3 videos before they, the video with Dennis Quaid, let's give them something to talk about, that hit the women, and VH1 came online at that same time when she was. She
just came out of nowhere.
She came out of nowhere, and
but she was so talented long before people knew who she was.
She was,
yeah.
And with that help from the record company and management and everything, she won 5 Grammys on that thing.
Just and with all of those wins, she's still considered underrated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when she won, it was 2 years ago, she won Song of the Year.
Yeah.
And
we're talking 40 years later now, almost, right?
Yeah, and she's, well, I'm 78, she's 75.
I won't tell her that you told her age.
Yeah. I never do much tell anybody, but they all know it. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the beauty of it all, that when she goes out, she has so many dedicated fans at that age, and we just, we went from one record to the next. But what I did on the first tour of Nick of Time, I tried something that Chris and I had, toyed with Julio, and that was Julio couldn't get his sound. He just couldn't hear the way he wanted to hear himself. That would incite him to be the artist that he could be. And we were in the Bahamas with Julio, and we were doing rehearsals at, the level of, when come out of the woods here in Texas or something, and all of a sudden you're with a guy that's, the number one guy all over the world.
Yeah.
And now we're rehearsing at a house that's on a bay there in the Bahamas, and there was only 3 houses on it, and he was on the one looking out onto the bay. And it was owned by somebody like the president of Universal or something like that.
Yeah, some big shot.
And they had a huge, it was bigger than the studio, but it was a solid glass in looking out on the ocean with a hardwood floor and all the bars for dancers, so they had, lots of people came in, stars, they were told, you wouldn't believe who all's been here to rehearse and dance and get into shape for a movie or whatever.
Right.
So here's Julio. Well, Julio was, he was doing some hair work and teeth work and everything, and spending a couple of weeks of downtime while we rehearsed every day 2 or 3 hours in that beautiful space. And one morning about 8 o'clock, I get a call. It's Jules. And I go, what's up, boss? And he says, would you please come down to the house? I said, you mean the castle? Anyway, he invited me down. And from the start, when I joined them, I was there to fix something.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, I came on with experience and all this stuff. And so I was supposed to find that thing that fixed it for
the
Julio.
troubleshooting, yeah.
So we just sat there, had some cafe, and he said, Paul, do you know the crater in Arizona? And I went, oh, the meteorite crater out there? And he goes, yes. He says, Julio, and he started talking about himself in third person. Julio's voice would like to be heard like in the center of that crater. He said, when I find, and he said, when I find my galaxy, and I said, your galaxy, he said, that's when I find that sound, then it immenses me. And he said, I'm not a singer. He said, I was a soccer player that got injured in a car wreck, and wrote a song while he was injured, and that song went under, when I joined him, and it sold 50 million copies as a single. And it's still one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. I mean, I watch people all the women just get goosebumps and just fall all over their old man when he was singing, Hey. And he said, I would like to, Julio's voice wants to be at the center of the crater. And that when it immerses me, when I find my galaxy, he says, then I can sing. He says, then God gave me this voice that I never knew I had. And he said, when I feel my universe all around me, he says, then it all happens. He said, I don't have to try, I don't have to think about it, I don't do it, I just start singing the songs, and then everything works. And so I said, I'll work on that, boss. I said, let's see, because after that we were going to Europe. And so about a couple of weeks later, we flew to Europe, started 2 or 3 months over there. And the very first place we played was like in Denmark or something like that. And it was an old, convention center type thing. It had the rollerdrome in it for all the bicycle things. And they could open it up and put the stage in. But the electricity was horrible. I mean, we got used to driving mic stands in the ground and pulling the four-aught out there with a pair of channel locks on.
Wow.
To get a good ground. And we got there, and so we're finally getting some decent audio sound, and I'm thinking about it. And my job after I joined them is we mixed front of house and monitors from front of house. They bought Julio told us right off, and he says, how can we be more consistent on these gigs? Because we were using all kinds of really horrible stuff.
Yeah.
And so, well, if you got the money, let's buy a Harrison monitor desk that had 16 cents, and because we had 8 monitor cents going up there, and then the rest of it all front of house. Julio didn't want to look over to the side to try to tell somebody I need more of this or more of this.
He just wants you to know.
Oh, he would just look at us, and at the very first he'd just stop the show. And you go, Chris, we were doing the only remote Johnny Carson thing that he ever did. And he's sitting out there at where Disneyland is.
Anaheim.
Anaheim.
Yeah.
So we're doing the biggest amphitheater out there, and Julio's backstage talking to Johnny as they're doing all this stuff for the show that night.
Yeah.
And then he walks out on the stage to sing, and he couldn't hardly talk. They gave him some tea that'd been sitting around for a while, and it was cold. And then he got it. And we did 3 sold out nights in a row, and this was the 3rd one. And by this, it just cratered.
It was done.
Oh, he stopped the show a couple of times. He went, "Goodies, thank you very much." And Chris is going, "Oh no." Yeah, and I'm going, "What? Hey, buddy." And I'd only been with him a few shows at the time. I said, "Hey, man," he's saying, "this is a good thing." He goes, "No, it isn't." "Thank you very much, Chris. This is the worst sound ever." And I'm going, "No," like that. And then somebody walking behind front of the house says, "Hey, thanks, Chris." I said, "My name's Ralph." and I actually, I quit that night. I said, "Buddy, you don't do that to yourself or the audience." And he said, "Man, please stay with me. Please stay with us. We'll get it." He said, "We're getting there now." And so that's when we went to Europe.
Yeah.
And we get over there, and like I say, I'm up on stage, and my job was to handle the monitor side up there, get all of Julio's stuff up there. The power amps and the graphics were on stage. And so I would do all of that while Chris is kind of ringing out the house a little bit. And so we're all ready, and Julio's supposed to be there in about 15 minutes. And I'm sitting there with this mic, and I'm going, "Chris, have you ever put him," I'm sitting there listening to the whole system, and I was going, and I said, "All right, give me some more reverb," and that's what it was. He could not feel or hear his reverb the way he wanted it.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I figured that's what he meant.
8.6 seconds of decay time.
Okay.
So when he went, it went,
Right.
for 8 seconds. And I said, Julio's looking for something different. I said, "Have you ever put any reverb in his monitors?" And boy, Chris went, "Oh, no," because he didn't know how to be able to handle it or do it, without being on stage.
Right.
And I said, on the 2 returns, send them to, number 1 monitor guy right here. And I said, let me just sit here and hold the mic. Julio was singing half the time with this mic down in the
way
down just there. And he was using the 58 when I joined. The first thing I did is I got him a buy, 736 or something, a really great condenser. And as soon as he used it, he went, and he'd just make sounds and tones and stuff as he'd listened to everything. And I had the reverb turned down. I said, "Chris, when he comes in, I'm going to go out there and just have a couple of words with him, talk about his galaxy. And when I started doing this, I want you to break, because we found a good location for it to end up with before he got here." And I said, you mark it right there so you don't go past that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I walked out, I had a white towel over my arm, and I handed him his mic, and he never used wireless because he needed the cable to support him from his accident. He had to have somebody holding on to him.
Right, like a
and
crouch.
So I have it like this, and I said, "Here's your galaxy, boss." And you, fa, and I'm doing this to Chris. Bring it up. Slow but easy. And when he started hearing the reverb coming up, and he had 6 of the Clear Brothers double 15 monitors.
Yeah.
He had the half moon shape right there.
Mm-hmm.
And when it started coming up like this, he just all of a sudden, he got goosebumps, and he's going, and he looked at me and just started smiling. I said, "Here you go, boss." And then I went back out front, and we just started doing sound check. And later after the show, he called me over, and he says, "We're there."
Nice.
We're there.
You took
From
him to
that
the
point
crater.
on, and that's when I decided to go ahead and stay, because it just got better.
Yeah.
Because Julio never again stopped the show and started yelling at Chris because he wasn't hearing what he wanted to do.
Well, you called him on his bullshit, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we played the Budokan with Julio, and it was still in that kind of that same area of space in that first year. And he had never called me by my name yet.
Yeah.
And so we're in the Budokan, and it's just, you know, it's cavernous city out there. It's just the worst sounding place. It's just concrete echoing all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris is up on stage doing something with the girls' mics or something. He's fixing something on stage, and I'm out front. And Chris, Julio, he goes, my engineer number 2. You know, like this, and we'd been traveling, and it just did sit with me very well.
I bet not.
And I went, oh, engineer number 2, and I'm back there now. It's just starting to boil over. I said, man, I almost quit some, a month or so ago. This is just another one of those. That's ain't right. And Antonio, his guitar player, was Julio's best friend from school and all these things. And he's the guy who handled the money. He was your best friend, accountant, and just this kind of chuffy guitar player. Just perfect for what Julio wanted to hear. And Julio, I'm back there going, and I'm just kind of walking around, fuming a little bit, letting off steam. And Julio left the stage. And in the Budokan, when you leave the stage, you go up big concrete stairs up to the dressing rooms up there, and it's really open.
Yeah.
And so I come back, and I'm going to go up there and tell Julio what my name is and all that stuff. And Tony was already ready at the bottom of the stairs. He was going, it's okay. And I said, no, and I knew, and I just finally, I said, Tony, he doesn't even know my name, and I've been here and I've been helping him, and I just laid it out on Tony, and Julio's hearing it upstairs.
Yeah.
The next day we come in, and the first thing, oh, Paul, can you hear me do this? And from that point on, he was calling me Paul 3 or 4 times during sound checks and stuff like that. And I was going, Tony said, worked out great.
You got to put them in their place, man.
Yeah.
I like that.
And from that point on, that's when I really got to be good friends with Julio. And I got to tell you this one story. We were in Italy, and the Capezio shoe people came down, and Julio had just done an endorsement with them for Capezios that were going to be called Julios.
Okay.
And they're these little flat things that, when you walk, the heel doesn't, you whoop, black, whoop, black, whoop, black. And I hated it. I put it, they measured us all, and I tried something.
You all had to use them?
Well,
God.
They all, this is when he and I really came tight. We get back to America. We're at Caesar's Palace in Vegas, and we do a 2-week run there, usually about every 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And I'm wearing my Chucks, and all of a sudden, here some guys with security, and they come in with a bunch of boxes. They lay them all out on the front stage during sound check, and everybody's getting their Capezios, and they were all in pastel colors. And I said, yeah, just blue, the yellow ones. I said, nah, I'm not wearing that. That's I said, yeah, I make mine, and they were size 10, and these blue things came out, and I took one of my shoes off and put one on just to check it out. It fit perfectly, but as soon as I took a step and lifted up like this and stepped that way, the heel would flop down. It would just no. I said, all I can do is walk very daintily with these shoes.
Yeah.
And so we got them all and everything, and Julio goes back to his dressing room while we're doing all this stuff. And I'm looking at the bass player, Vicente, and I say, hey, Vinny, what size you wearing? He's trying to figure it out in American sizes to his España. And I said, mine are 10s. He goes, oh. I said, you can have them. And he went, oh, 2 sets of Julios. I mean, he'll love me. He's got to love me more now.
Yep.
And Vinny was a really good guy. And all the guys in his band have been with him ever since he became a star.
Right.
And so I put my Chuck back on, and I go back behind the drum riser, and the drum riser was one of these real big ones because we had all these horn players and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sitting up on the drum riser where my feet are hanging off at about, chest level if anybody walks by. And so I'm just kind of sitting there hanging out like this, and I see the dressing room door open down there, and Julio comes out, and he looks down, and I just kind of, you know, he comes walking by, and he stops, and he's looking at my chucks, and he goes, Paul, why do you wear such ugly shoes? And I said, well, Chief, and before I got anything out, after calling him Chief, he just, what is this Chief? And I said, you know, like Cochise or Sitting Bull, Native American, the head cheese.
Yeah, yeah.
I had 2 or 3 little metaphors, whatever. And he sat there for a second. And I said, you know, the top man, you know, the boss. He went, I think I like this Chief. And he said to me, and I'm the only one that ever called him anything except, you know, Julio.
Yeah.
Yes, Julio. Yes, Julio. And we toured the rest of the world on that tour like this. And we'd be in, you know, I promised myself when I went with Julio, I was going to go to every party that Julio was going to be at. If they invited us, I was going to go.
Yeah.
You never know who you'd meet or where you're going to be.
Of course, and you have to meet a lot of people when you're in that business.
Oh, yeah. And so we flew into Sydney out of Africa. And all the horn players were drunk and playing in the back of a 747. And we're all partying on there. And we get into Sydney, and it's raining like crazy. But he has a party set up that night at a place. It's like almost like Joe's or something like that. It was a bar, restaurant type thing. And one of the reasons I took that tour, I wanted to see 2 places in the world if I got a chance to. One of them was the Opera House in City, and Ground Zero in
New York.
In Japan.
Oh, Japan. Okay.
Yeah, and we played Hiroshima. The hotel was right across the street from Ground Zero.
Wow.
And Japanese people come 24 hours a day bringing origami, the little piece of paper like this square makes a little bird.
The swan
and then they
thing.
put them on top, put them on top, put them on top.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't go to the hotel. We went straight to the gig, and I was asking the band, I says, how close are we to, you know, they said, man, we're sitting there at Ground Zero.
Yeah.
You know, we're at the hotel and everything. And I get back over there, and everybody's kind of looking around, and I just walk out the side door, and there I was walking right into the park where the church is.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there all night, and, you know, like that was, you know, 2 of the things
Surreal.
I wanted to do, I got to do them on that tour with Julio.
Wow.
But we had a big record company party when we got into Australia, pouring down rain, and I said, you know, I'm asking, everybody's so tired and wore out because we spent the whole day in Zaire as they searched everything we had 2 or 3 times, all of our bags, all the outs, all that stuff. And we get in there, and most of the crew guys had people waiting on them. One of them, our Rodney, the guy that got me the gig, was Mr. Saxman. He had toured down there with Dr. Hook.
Nice.
And so he knew the bikers, all
Yep.
the guys. They met us with, you know, half pound of herb and all this stuff. And so that kind of that part of the group went straight on to partying at the hotel. And then one of the girl singers, you know, called me, do you want to go to the party? Julio really wants us to come because they were, you know, 3 unbelievable singers and beautiful and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, we're getting a cab if you want to go. And I'll be right downstairs. And so I went to the party, and we're driving through the rain in a cab and everything. We pull up under some trees and everything, and it's a place called, you know, Joe's or something like that. Very special place. We walk inside, and we walk through some hallways like this, and it opens out onto the stage of the Opera House.
Wow.
The club was the Opera House bar and dinner thing that's up behind the stage and everything.
Wow.
It looks right out onto the harbor.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there going, number 2.
Yeah.
Number 2. And we sat there. That's when I really, you know, that's when I really graduated into, you know, being close enough with Julio that I could almost do anything I wanted to do. because we had this huge dinner and all these tables, and they gave him like 4 different platinum records. Everywhere we went, he had platinum records. And so we get a table, and I've got all the girls with me and 2 of the more fun time guys in the band. And we grabbed a waiter came by, and I said, "You are now this table's waiter. Is that okay?" "Sure, mate. No problem. What do you need?" And I said, "A champagne bottle for everybody at the table." And all of a sudden, we're all just pouring champagne down and looking out on this thing. And they brought out a gigantic rolling table with all of the desserts on it. I mean, it was dessert city. Everything you could ever imagine for dessert was on this thing. And Julio decided he was going to leave at that time. And he had a big entourage with him, and it was a narrow area where they had it. And so I'm up there with 2 of the singers, and we're kind of taking a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And Julio's coming down behind us, and I turn around, and as he comes by me, he gives me the wink, and I, "What's up, Chief?" And I just kind of gave him a pat on the back as he came by, but he kind of tripped.
Oh.
Right as he was doing it. And I mean, he had a broken back, and every step he takes, it just has to be right. And people were kind of getting real thick in through there. And so as I put my hands, I kind of touched his head, I could feel him lunging forward. So I reached around real quick and just got my hand in the center of his chest and straightened him up.
Yeah.
And all the security and all these people, they don't know who I am or anything else, and they're all getting ready to freak. And Julio just goes,
Yeah.
You just did say, he did that to me many times. He just come in and grab me like that and do this thing.
Yeah.
Very nice, very nice.
All right. This might be the hardest question for you.
Okay.
So we started in the 50s, and you're 78 years old now, and you've had, over 60 years in music in some way.
Yeah.
What do you hope your legacy is?
Well, I've been talking to a few people around the area, like Jimmy Wallace and stuff like that. I said, I'm thinking, right now I've got 3 things that I need to finish. I built this studio for my dad's music. I wanted the studio big enough that I could do a big band thing, do it live, like they did it in the old school. And I finally got to do this just some months ago. It was called the Rock Ridge Big Band. And I said, okay. And I brought them all in. They were going to rehearse. One of the horn players is the leader of the band. Lives on the corner up here, Larry Spencer. And
I saw your interview with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he brought in all these great players, and most of them North Texas graduates and stuff, but most of them in their senior years and stuff. And I went out to hear them in a rehearsal at a place over in North Dallas one night. And I said, "Oh, you guys would be perfect. I've got one thing left to do." I built this thing for Black Horse to do the second album whenever we could do it. And I built it for my dad's music, so I really wanted to experience that and see if I could pull it off.
The big band sound.
Yeah, I had no idea how I was going to do it. But Larry, living over in the corner, I called him up on a Thursday or on a Wednesday. I said, "When are you guys going to rehearse again?" He goes, "Well, we're supposed to tomorrow." I said, "Is there any way y'all could do it out here at the studio, and I'll record you and let's have some fun?"
Well, that's an easy question.
And so he called. I said, "All I need them to do is bring their own music stand. I've got 4 or 5, but I don't have 25.
Yeah.
And any comfortable chair that they like to use. Most of them all carry their own."
And this excited you?
Oh, I was just sitting there going, "Can you do it?" And he calls me up and said, "Yeah, we're all good. We'll see you out there about 10 o'clock tomorrow."
I love this.
And do you know who Timothy Wallace lives here? Well, he has, his mother used to be married to T. Boone's, Pickens. And his family, the Wallace family, started Trinity Industries, the largest family-owned business in Texas.
Okay.
For like 100 years. They built railroad cars, highway stuff, got into mining and all this stuff. And he started. I was coming up here to open up the studio for. I had a film crew that was doing a soundtrack off of my piano out there, and the day before, and they said, "Man, is there any way we could use your barn out there to shoot some, some stuff over the weekend?" And I said, "Yeah, as long as you don't make noise at Kenny down there as a film guy. If it's you got to do any kind of loud stuff up there." They said, "Oh no, they were making a remake of Thunder Road, and they had a hot Camaro sitting out there with a little campfire behind it."
Nice.
So I'm driving up on Saturday morning to open the gate to let them in, and I pull up there, and here's a brand new Escalade sitting there with the paper on the window, and I pull up beside it, and he's right by the driveway, but on the road out there. And I said, "Excuse me, are you one of the crew guys for the movie?" And he, no. He says, "Actually, I bought this land. I mean, we've been praying for 20 years that nobody'd buy that pasture out there." Now there's houses starting to build up.
I noticed that, yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, I just bought this land out here, and I was coming to look at it." But he said, "Is there a recording studio out here somewhere?" And I went, "Yeah, actually there is." He said, "Well, I have a nephew that gave me, and his name was like Aiden, which, not a normal name that I'd always hear."
Yeah.
And I said, 4 young guys came out. I did a session for him. And he says, he gave me a CD, and he says, "Uncle Tim, this is the finest studio in the world." He said, "Man, it was just," he said, "we just went in there and tore it up and had so much fun." And me and Aiden, one of the things that I look at as a legacy for me is I love, I was going to be a school teacher if all these things hadn't happened to me along the way, and a coach. And so I really enjoy, talking with young kids, because almost every one of them, the first question is, how do we make a living doing what we love to do? And I said, first you got to find it here, because if you really love it, you can accomplish anything, I feel. And so, anyway, Tim gets, the nephew's CD, and he had just started a thing called Dallas Music Network. And he was going to do like an iTunes type of thing. And his dad, granddad, and great-granddad had all been CEO of Trinity Industries for like 40 years of their life, and then handed over here to the next one down, then handed over here, and then when it got handed to him, he did about 20 years and just thought about it because, gosh, I've got more money than I could even dream of trying to spend. He said, I just decided I wanted to give back. So I resigned and sold a lot of the interest of the company away and started Dallas Music Network. And we had a good talk about it. And he said, I'd love to invite you. He said, every Saturday night, he said, I've got people down in the garment area, down there off Lemon and Oklahoma area and stuff. He says, and I do this thing, I bring in video people from Austin and everybody. I went to, he says, I'd love to have you come out and see what we're doing. And I said, sure. And so it was Saturday afternoon. I said, well, I need to go to Whole Foods and do some shopping and stuff. So I'll go down to Tim's and see this thing. I go to Louis first and have 2 margaritas and a pizza, hit my 5 minutes in Whole Foods, and then drive over to this place. And I'm sitting there just, and this COVID was pretty strong. Everybody was masked up. And I go in and I'm just blown away by the professional. Everybody there were top of the line.
Yeah.
Filmmakers and stuff out of Austin came up, and so it was all going well. I thought he might want me to do something in audio, and I'd go over to the audio guy, and I said, man, these guys, they got it all together, and I'm telling him. And he decides, he said, could I rent your studio sometime and maybe do something out of it? And I'm sure, of course you can. Well, he came out and he brought 3 ladies that all had a song they wanted to record for the Dallas Music Network. And he brought out, oh gosh, I mean, it was, Erykah, Badu's drummer, this guy over here, and here's this, young Hispanic guitar player, looked like he's 16 years old, and he's playing like Barney Kessel. I mean, just unbelievable player. And then guy walks in, and it's Bobby Ray Sparks. And I'm going, Sparks! Yeah, and he just had 2 heart attacks and was now recovering. And I'm sitting there going, who contacted you? He said, oh, so-and-so in the band. And so we had it all live in there, and all 3 of the ladies sitting right there, and we recorded each one of their songs, and the other 2 would do backups on each, the other artist stuff. So we did it all, and did a lot of interviews with each and every.
I saw that. Yeah, that's where I saw those interviews. Yeah.
Did you see Pappy's place?
I did.
That was it. Well, I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm humping to get it because I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of instruments, and it's all live and everything. And so at the end of the night, there's an engineer named Mav. He calls himself Mav Tracks. Yeah, and he's a real strong black man that really knew his Pro Tools stuff, and I knew they weren't going to do it Pro Tools, and it's not what I like to use. This was built to do analog.
Analog, yeah.
So I just got all the tones and sounds on them, and so him and another guy named RT or something like that did all that part of it. And so at the end of the night, all the videos that they transferred all to my computer, and Mav left, and it was about maybe 9 o'clock, something like that. We started in the afternoon, ran most of the day. Anyway, he's at home, and I'm sending him all the files, and it's going to take 4 or 5 hours to do that. So I'm sitting here kind of doing stuff, cleaning up in the studio, and I'm looking over every once in a while to see how it's going. And he calls me up about 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, how close are we getting to it? And so I popped the computer and pulls up. And I said, it looks like it says 5 minutes or something like that. And he goes, oh, great. He said, well, I'm going to bed, so send me an email when it's done from you, or send me a text or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I go ahead and open it up and get to the home page on it, and I look up on there, and the title of it is Pappy's Place, Episode 1. And I went, what? I had no idea this was happening.
They surprised you with it.
Oh, they surprised me good, and they had all these interviews and all these people talking about the studio and Pappy, and he's even got a bowl of pecans on the table, just like grandmother's, this kind of stuff. And I'm going, okay. And the best part of that was, I've been dating a lady out of Chicago that I met at the Grammys through another friend.
Right.
And her husband was Marty Feldman, who owned Paragon Studios.
I know Marty Feldman, yeah.
And I mean, they've got platinum records stacked like pancakes
Yeah.
in the basement. And then they've got 40 of her in her workroom. She's a school teacher. She's a really high level.
You're good.
She's a high level gal at the Chicago Art Institute, and so they interviewed me over there at that show that I went to that night, and they asked me, I understand that you're dealing with some health issues and everything. I said, real quickly, I said, yeah. I went to the doctor and found out I had stage 4 cancer, and started that journey. And that's after I'd watched my sweet lady who had cancer and homeopathically almost cured herself completely of endometrium uterine cancer. And she did it all holistically and everything for like 4.5 years. And then went into Marin County Hospital. It was a really good doctor, and they went in and snipped out the little rest of it, and she was done. And so we had a little talk about all that, and so all that ends up on Pappy's Place thing, and they showed it without me even seeing it. And I'm going, oh boy, I don't know what.
It's good.
Yeah,
it's good. I like it.
It was fun.
Yeah.
And the big bad is Pappy's Place Episode 2.
Yep.
And we've never got it past all the stuff that they sent it. They sent all the video to some group in Tulsa.
Yeah.
That they knew or whatever, and they sent us a rough copy of it and everything. But the interviews that we did with Larry right here, the audio, he had some lives that he didn't really care for, but that's all he had. And we kind of went through some of my stuff, and I said, well, this is good enough.
Right.
But they had really good level on the interviews, and when they sent us the copy of the whole edited thing, you know, the interview like this, la 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 like this, when the music come out, and so I'm having to try to relate to these people in Tulsa, and they just didn't get it. I said, I sent you 0 reference. You know, the music cannot, the voices cannot be this loud, and the music comes on, and you have to turn the stereo 10 or 15.
It's like Hulu. It's like watching Hulu.
And so, so it never, as far as I know, it's never got past that. They couldn't. You know, they just didn't know how to match it. I said, I can't do anything more than send you the same copy that I sent you. I said, and somewhere in there, you got to be able to have the audio on this thing on the mixture. And I don't know if they ever got it done or not, because I haven't heard anything more about it.
Well, I'm going to try to wrap this up like this. This is a working studio.
Yeah.
I want people to know that out there. This is Palmyra Studios in Palmer, Texas.
Yeah.
And you guys can find it at palmyrastudios.com, and it's just a wealth of information on here. You can rent this studio. You guys can come out here, and Pappy will work you on your music in this studio. This is a working studio. That's important for you guys to know that. But to wrap up your legacy, it's right here on your webpage, and I want to try to add a little bit to it to perhaps pull this episode together. Palmyra was an ancient city in Syria that was founded by King Solomon, son of David and Bathsheba, and it was just north of Damascus. It was an arts and cultural mecca. It became a powerful trade center during the days of Marco Polo. Now, in Native American legend, Palmyra was a place where you never grow old, a place you would never die, kind of like music.
That's it.
And I would add, like Pappy Middleton.
Hey y'all, this is India Ramey. Thanks for tuning in to the Boston Chris Show.